been a reporter in Silicon Valley since the late 1990s, and it was just an amazing job. I mean, there's sort of no other place for that period to cover business in the world that was that exciting. I mean, there were just so many great companies being started, so many smart people, so many just interesting, quirky, weird people and characters. And I just loved it, and I sort of ate everything up about it. A lot of reporters, when they get successful, move to New York. I never did that. I always stayed at Silicon Valley. And at some point over the last few years, I started feeling like Silicon Valley was not going to be the center of all high-growth entrepreneurship anymore. And it wasn't the idea that Silicon Valley is finished and there's another Silicon Valley. It's the idea that the nature of entrepreneurship has just changed along with globalization, along with communication, along with sort of all of these forces that I've been writing about, many of which started in the Valley. So that now, the center of where there's high growth isn't in the US anymore. There's all these emerging markets that have these insane economies and booming consumer demand. At the same time, they're able to see, because of communication and technology, what's been going on in other parts of the world, and they want that lifestyle and they're demanding it. And then you have billions of dollars of venture capital that's flowing around parts of the world trying to find new things to invest in. So you almost have this mashup of cultures, of styles of doing business, and different cultures of entrepreneurship that are all kind of going on in real time. And I think in the next decade or so, when we're looking at what are the billion-dollar companies that have really defined that decade, they're going to be from all over the place, but they're definitely not all going to be from Silicon Valley. At most, maybe Silicon Valley will get to fund a lot of them and benefit in that way. So I felt like, this had been slowly evolving as people were getting very excited about China and India and other countries. But I felt like the reason I covered Silicon Valley really well was because I was there and I knew about stories and I knew about companies before, a reporter from New York would, say. So I felt like I never really wrote about China. I never wrote about any of these countries because I felt like I really had to be there and be on the ground and meet entrepreneurs and see what was going on. And if you notice, almost no other US publications really wrote about entrepreneurship in these countries either. They wrote about big multinationals coming in, or they wrote about factories in China. They wrote about call centers in India. So it's like, they're telling the story of globalization, but not the story of entrepreneurship. And I knew from just the way I report and my experience that I had to spend a lot of time in places in order to tell that story. So I was sort of top of my game in Silicon Valley and made the somewhat controversial decision that my next book was going to be about the world. And then I would leave Silicon Valley pretty much. And I'd been thinking, I'm not going to write another book, so I'm not going to find another topic that's this big, that's this important, that's this exciting. And it just kind of hit me as I was laying there. As I said, I kept hearing sort of slowly about all these other places and what was going on. And I'd been so confined to Silicon Valley, I hadn't really traveled or seen a lot of this. And I mean, the book has kind of morphed since then, but that was the time when my basic idea was, I'm going to go spend 6 weeks in 6 different countries and see what high-growth entrepreneurship. And it's changed a little bit since then. It's much more focused on emerging markets now, and some of the countries that I'm spending time in have changed. But it's and with South America, it's tricky because it seems like the entrepreneurship is very scattershot. So I'm kind of trying to try out a couple different countries and see where I should, focus. But yeah, it's basically an 18-month project, and I'm spending about 40 weeks in other countries. So it's fairly ambitious. It's definitely something no one in their right mind would fund. This is definitely something I believe in. I believe people in the Valley still think the center of the entrepreneurship world is Silicon Valley, and that's conflated right now with there not being a lot of big high growth opportunities. The Valley itself has gotten so institutionalized. There's so much money flooding around. People don't really have to take risks anymore, and that really changes the companies that come out of it. And at the same time, we're being very hostile to immigrants. I mean, there's a huge tide in both of our political parties that's anti-immigration, which is ridiculous because if you look at the history of Silicon Valley, a very high percentage, something like 45 or 50% of the best companies have all been started by immigrants. So it's like we're choking off the very lifeblood that built Silicon Valley. So I think all of this combines to just make the case that the best companies aren't going to be in Silicon Valley anymore. And I guess it just seems so clear to me that as a reporter, the reason I've done well in my career is like in the late 90s, I moved to Silicon Valley. And so I was a little bit behind on the story, but I still got to kind of like ride that wave. And then I started writing about Web 2.0 companies before a lot of other people were. And so, that's why I got my last book deal, and that's why I had a lot of contacts no one else did. And so in looking at my career and thinking, what is the next big wave that as a reporter who covers entrepreneurship I should be out in front of? It's emerging markets. And so I guess I'm kind of like betting with my time and with my money that I'm right. And if nothing else, it's a great opportunity. I mean, the last year, going to, to China, to India, to Africa, now South America, spending time in Israel. I mean, it fundamentally changes the way you think as an American. And I mean, I think the big surprise to me in researching this book, and I guess I'm about halfway done now, is the degree to which emerging markets are all working with one another. So, for instance, one country I've spent a lot of time, which sounds very weird, but it's been an amazing success story, is Rwanda in Africa. And so Rwanda has basically, in the last 15 years since its genocide, completely rebuilt its society. And they've gotten a lot of investment money from Dubai and the Middle East. Chinese companies have come in and built all their infrastructure in an incredibly smart way. And they're sending 300 of their students a year to IIT in India to get trained in coding so they can come back and help automate the country. So it's like, there you have an example of this whole country and society that's being rebuilt from the ground up, and the United States has nothing to do with it. And you see that all over the place. I mean, I don't know any Silicon Valley VCs that are investing in Brazil, even though it's one of the most, fast-growing and largest economies. There's certainly a lot of Chinese companies investing in Brazil and a lot of Dubai money going into Brazil. So I think the real threat for America isn't China, isn't India, isn't Brazil. It's the degree to which this whole world of commerce is starting to develop around all these countries that the US isn't playing a role in.